So I'm going to call our next panelist up. We have the pleasure of having Tim Sullivan with the California Public Utilities Commission. Please join us. And Randall Winston with the Strategic Growth Council. We also have Patrick Saxton with the California Energy Commission, who will be joining us, but unfortunately his flight has gotten delayed, so he will be coming midway through the conversation. So we'll go ahead and get started and hope that he can join us later. So we're going to stick with this theme of creating a vision for California and speaking a little bit about the transformation that's going to be needed. And we're already seeing a number of opportunities where dialogue around major shifts are coming up. And this involves a lot of partners. It involves clearly local governments, all of you in this room, our utility partners, our state partners, our business leaders in our communities, and we'll take a lot of innovation, whether that's technology or new ways of approaching things. So I'm very pleased that we have these panelists here to start the dialogue with us that will continue over the next 2 days. So in terms of official introductions, Mr. Sullivan has worked with the CPUC in various capacities for 28 years. Since assuming the position of executive director, Mr. Sullivan has focused on increasing the transparency and accountability of CPUC operations. Prior to becoming acting chief administrative law judge, Mr. Sullivan served as assistant chief administrative law judge and an administrative law judge, where his most noticeable recent proceeding developed privacy rules to protect consumer data. Thank you for joining us. And we have Randall Winston, who is appointed executive director to the Strategic Growth Council at the end of 2015. Prior to his appointment, Randall served as the Governor Brown's office, served in Governor Brown's office as a special assistant to the executive secretary, where he helped to implement executive orders on green building and zero emission vehicles, as well as international climate change policy. So he is certainly not shy about taking on a challenge. And I will go ahead and introduce Patrick Saxton as well, so he can jump on the stage and join us when he gets here. Patrick is a policy advisor at the California Energy Commission. He's responsible for appliance and building energy efficiency, including strategies to increase savings from existing buildings. He is focused on building energy efficiency standards and development of PV programs and implementation. And previously, he was a private sector electrical engineer. So he's got a lot of great experience that he'll bring to the conversation when he joins us. So I'm going to start the dialogue with these two gentlemen, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. So definitely be jotting down any questions that may occur to you. We're going to have a little bit of a different flow. We'll take the questions, and then as soon as Patrick joins, we'll put him on the hot spot as well. So starting out with you, Tim, I'd love to hear a little more of your thoughts. There's some big opportunities right now. We have the administrative law judge asked for input on statewide programs and energy efficiency programs run by third parties. So would love to hear, and I know many folks in the room are engaged in conversations about what this means for their local communities and how they should be thinking about the impact for their program. So would love to hear a little bit about your goals through this program, the sorts of things you would like to see, and potential for transformation within that realm.
Oh, okay, I'll just get started. I guess in the big picture, the Commission shares the Governor's vision for a sustainable California, a sustainable future. And our focus, the Governor set out for us certain goals: greenhouse gas reduction, the doubling of efficiency building energies, a reduction in petroleum use in cars and trucks by 50%, and an increase in renewable energy to 50% of all power generated. Well, for the Commission to play its role, renewable energy use must grow. That is sort of a major task that we need to do. At this point, we're aware more and more that we're beginning to reach the end of what we can get from appliance programs, individual things like refrigerator rebates and things, and we have to move to a larger community-based approach. In this role, local government is obviously going to be key. What I hope we will get out of this new proceeding is a way to increase the role of local government in energy efficiency programs. And then something which is needed sort of more than anything is a simplification of the rules for local government participation. We have a large evaluation and monitoring and verification system that tries to make sure that Californians get value for the money they spend. But we have to have a program that allows people with new ideas to come forward and to have a chance to participate.
Great, thank you. And maybe as a follow-up, thinking about the governor's goals, clearly they cut across energy efficiency, and local governments in the programs they run also are looking for integration and for a comprehensive approach. So do you have any thoughts on how we can allow the most flexibility for local governments within the regulatory barriers that we currently have? And maybe that's a conversation for Randall to weigh in as well on how we can start to pair different funding sources or allow for more flexibility so that we can do those comprehensive local programs.
Yes, actually, I have a governor's appointee who's working with me. Her name is Denise Terrell. She's at the front table. Mm-hmm. And she's been working on ideas to create something like a common application process. I think any of you who have children in college age, or perhaps those who are young enough to have been to college recently, will know that almost all colleges have what's called a common app, so that you don't have to refill out basically the same information again and again across each college. She's working on proposals to try and develop a common application for energy efficiency programs, whether they're funded by the Strategic Growth Council, the Public Utilities Commission, the Air Resources Board, or any of the number of alphabet soup agencies that all have a role to play in energy efficiency. So anyway, that's where we're going, and we're hoping that that will succeed and be taken up by the different agencies.
Randall, you run a council that is already made up of multiple state agencies. Certainly the programs you've run are fairly integrated already. The Affordable Housing, Sustainable Communities, matches transportation and housing. There is a transformational climate communities pot in the governor's budget and some legislation on that now. How do you see that expanding the ability for local governments to have comprehensive programs? And clearly, especially on the transformational climate communities pot, it is a very different approach to funding local governments the way it's been considered right now. So can you speak a little bit about how that reflects the administration's goals moving into the future?
Absolutely, and thank you again, Kate. I'm going to piggyback on Tim because I think he touched upon a lot of really important points. I think the programs that we currently run through SGC, they've taken, I think, a good step towards better integration, but they certainly are not integrated enough, and both from the standpoint of local government and communities, and from the standpoint of the state agencies and how we work together to better serve communities. And I think those sets of challenges are what, over time, conversations with Denise, who Tim mentioned, and certainly others across state agencies, led to the proposal in the governor's budget for transformational climate communities. And it's not just the governor. I've got to give credit to the legislature as well, both the Assembly and the Senate, for their proposals last year, which gave a nod to thinking through better ways to form a locally driven program. The governor's proposal is intentionally I'll say vague. It leaves a lot of room for not just interpretation, but input from all of you, and that's intentional. We know that in the formation of this program, if we get to the point of hopefully approving a cap and trade plan, and more to the point, extending AB 32, such a program needs to be designed locally. I'll touch upon a few points, I think principles that we'd like to see drive the program. So in addition to maximizing greenhouse gas reductions, ensuring that we are benefiting the most disadvantaged parts of the state. You've touched upon, Kate, and of course Tim, integration and cross-cutting approaches across not just existing programs within cap and trade, but perhaps outside of cap and trade as well. And I mean to say planning, financing, potentially other ways that can draw from other pots of funds, as well as other partnerships. So we're excited. We think it offers a new opportunity, and an opportunity not just for the state, but also for local governments, regional governments, to think through how we can better deploy resources.
You've both touched on ways that your agencies are looking at streamlining for efficiencies for local governments and trying to bring in as many pots of funding, in your case, to make the programs more flexible for comprehensive programming. What do metrics look like moving into the future? So as the state seems to be heading into a very performance-based sort of approach. How do we provide that ability for local governments to integrate and report back in a way that doesn't look like 20 different state agencies asking for 20 different types of metrics to report?
Well, I guess I can take a start at it. I'm hoping that the initiative for focusing on greenhouse gas reduction will actually carry the day. It offers a common numeraire. We as an energy agency, one of the things we've been measuring is reductions in energy use. But does that make sense anymore? Probably not, to the extent that the solution to greenhouse gas reductions is moving to electrical vehicles. If you have more electrical vehicles, you're going to have more electric use. Right. But if you look at the big picture, it may very well be leading to greenhouse gas reduction. The same could be true in the local area. If you build high-density housing, you may be spending more energy constructing taller buildings, but in the end, if they're served by mass transit, you have sort of a net reduction in greenhouse gases. We've been looking at these problems, and we're just in the beginning of that focus. It used to be in the past, we focused on renewable energy, making certain metrics, looking at energy efficiency, making certain metrics. We're now retooling to shift our metrics into a larger issue of greenhouse gas reduction.
I'd echo that as well, and say a few things. So one, I think from SGC's standpoint, we learned a good amount from our Prop 84 Sustainable Community Grant funding for the past 2 years in terms of the importance of measuring outcomes, being able to have clear outcomes to measure to begin with, and then performance metrics to guide future action. I think lessons learned from those sets of grants, of course, as well as from the first round of funding, not just through SGC's programs, but across cap and trade, will help inform the program design, at least for this new program, the Transformational Climate Communities. It's wrapped into, I think, another set of conversations around performance metrics, how we can better think through greenhouse gas accounting that I think are important and are worth mentioning. So as you probably know, we have the scoping plan that is under development right now, developed by the Air Resources Board in collaboration with other agencies, looking to map out a pathway to achieve our greenhouse gas reductions by 2030. And that's setting some broad goals. We'll have, I think, a set of important policy recommendations, but it's also, I think, laying the groundwork for new and better ways to measure greenhouse gas reductions, which will certainly inform programs. And to the point of kind of thinking through holistic approaches to community development, hopefully offering more cross-cutting ways to make those measurements. And we certainly hope to, from SGC's standpoint, create better collaboration amongst agencies for bringing those kind of cross-cutting accounting and performance metrics directly into our programs.
I'd like to comment a little bit further. I've been the executive director at the Commission for a year and a half, and one of my major goals is to try and have our agency re-engage with government, with the legislature, with the governor's office, with the state control agencies, and with local agencies on all levels. For a long time, our tradition as an independent commission has led us to sort of be closed and focused. But now the problems are becoming bigger and bigger, and we are focusing on our relationships with the Air Resources Board, the Energy Commission, and other state agencies. Now, I'm not painting an overly rosy picture. We're still at the very beginning of these things. And one of the projects that Denise Terrell brought to me was something called Oakland Echo Block. And this was a collaboration between professors at Stanford, Berkeley, and researchers at Lawrence Livermore and Lawrence Berkeley Lab to come up with a project that looked at a community as a whole, a low-income community, and looked to see what they could do in terms of housing, water, solar energy, and mass transportation to reduce greenhouse gas reductions. Well, that's a project that is just running into problem after problem in terms of getting funding, becoming a model, going from agency to agencies. So we know that there are real problems that you face day in and day out. I wish we could wave a magic wand to make these things go away, but my experience in government is that it's always easy to complexify or make processes longer. It's very hard to actually make them shorter.
I think a lot of people in this room would agree with that. Randall, I'm curious to hear more about, you mentioned some of the metrics and wanting to have clear outcomes around the grants that you guys have funded thus far. I'd love to hear more about other lessons you've learned from both the Prop 84 grants and then the Affordable Housing Sustainability, Sustainable Community grants. So, both in terms of the programming you've seen, what have been some really great successes? Are there other types of proposals you would love to see that you haven't? And then any lessons on who's applying and who's not applying?
Lots of great questions. I'll start with Prop 84. So we are actually in the midst right now of an evaluation of all of our grantees over the past few years, again, before I came on board, and that I think is going to allow or offer up some insightful and pretty valuable lessons, both from a metric standpoint, tracking standpoint, and what went right, what we did right well, and what we maybe did not so well or could think through differently. So that, number one. Number two, folks in our team are pulling out some of the more successful case studies from Prop 84 to develop a guidebook mapping out sort of planning to implementation. What does implementation mean? How is it different in different contexts? And how can it inform some of our new grant programs like AHSC? So on those sets of lessons, I'd say kind of stay tuned, hopefully the next month or so, but some high level points that I mentioned earlier. The importance of having clear outcomes and ways to measure success. And it's at one level that sounds relatively straightforward, but on another level it's maybe not so much when you kind of look at different cases and contexts. The importance of local leadership. Leadership is so critical. Having not just the ability at the state level to say, here's a set of programs or a set of opportunities, have at it, but the ability to offer assistance and guidance to local leaders and folks who are willing to take a step out to set a model, not just for the community, but for a given community, but for the state as well. So leadership is important. And then third, I'd say partnerships. So partnerships, not just at the local level or regional level, but maybe reaching outside of one's comfort zone to look to different ways to leverage funds. Those are all general comments, and I think hopefully more will come once we have some of these lessons learned printed and on the street. But let me move to AHSC and some of the current programs that we have. AHSC, the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program, is evolving. I think it's designed to be, and we've intended to be, an iterative sort of process where, in working with all of you, both recipients of the funds, those who are hoping to get the funds in the future, will inform development and evolution of the guidelines. So I want to say that up front. We're just in round 2 right now. I think some of the things that we've learned from the first round, just to touch upon some high points. We know that we need to increase and ramp up our outreach and technical assistance. It's a complicated program that has many components, and it's difficult to develop a project. There are communities that are I think in different stages of readiness in terms of their ability to think through how to best address issues around affordable housing, transit, the co-location of either, et cetera. So we brought on an outreach coordinator earlier on this year. I don't know if Monica is even here. She'll be here later today. And that outreach coordinator not only exists within SGC, but across all other cap and trade funding agencies. In addition, and this is something that I think will be debated not just this legislative round, but moving forward over the next 6 months or so, we do have a pilot technical assistance program for disadvantaged communities. Small amount of money, just $500,000, but really aimed at assisting those communities who applied last year for our funding but weren't successful, and also looking towards those who didn't apply at all to being successful. We are not seeing as many applications as we would like to see from Southern California. I'm from Redlands, just over the way. And it's kind of near and dear to my heart to see more competitive applications in this part of the state, given the number of disadvantaged communities, the level of need, and so it's an area of focus, a region of focus. So I'll pause there.
I'd like to just talk a little bit about how we see these evolving local government partnerships and these energy programs. Right now, we basically have 4 different programs, one for each different independently owned utility. At some point, we're hoping that to get commonalities across these programs so that there be commonalities across the state. So each city that's applying on its own will have more or less, an organization like Kate's could train everybody in how to apply, how to win grants. We also have basically 2 different forms of granting. One, we work through the utilities administer it, they choose the projects, they fund it. That's what's called the local government program. We also have a regional energy network, and I know there's one in Southern California and one in Northern California. Those receive a direct appropriation of money out of the renewable energy program each year, and they basically come up with the projects themselves, and they do it in a more autonomous way. I think that second path may very well become the wave of the future, working through local government organizations where you can fund those different things. On all these things, we would like to see a simplification and also coordination with other state agencies. That turns out to be extremely hard. Mm-hmm. I was recently reading Niall Ferguson's new biography of Henry Kissinger. And he describes, the author describes how Henry Kissinger went to Vietnam in 1964. He interviewed the CIA. This is when he was a professor before he was in government. He interviewed the CIA, the State Department, the Marines, and the Army. Everybody he talked to said it was a disaster and we should leave. And nobody talked to anyone else. And everyone developed policies that just became their policies. Each created an autonomous program, none of which made sense altogether, but which everyone measured and performed day in and day out. When I read this, I must say I thought of my own work, but not as important, but somehow often extremely frustrating.
And I would just to echo that, the scope and scale of the challenge that we are looking to address, I think after we get approval of a cap and trade plan here, different GHG accounting models and metrics, different timelines for programs. This sort of gets a little bit administrative. Definitely different levels of complexity with regard to applications, different ways of conducting outreach and assistance, not always having the most clear pathway towards who to go to for certain information for programs. What we are hoping to do with this new program is not just simplify the application process akin to, I think, what Tim was describing, but also on the performance and metrics side, simplifying that pretty substantially. It's difficult to say at this stage what that will look like, and I wish I could speak with more specificity. Part of that, I think, will come from all of you. We do anticipate having a fairly robust public process for further development of the guidelines for the new program should it be approved, and more to the point, a locally based way of approaching its its implementation. It'll be a multi-year program where I think we'll want to work hand in hand with local communities in actually rolling it out.
I know Kate is really good at numbers, and I think I should mention some of the numbers. The Commission funds about $150 million a year in energy efficiency programs in local government. I also wanted to mention the issue of liaison. Sandy Wing-Bigler, would you please stand up? Sandy is our local government outreach person for Southern California. We divided the state in regions, and if you have specific problems about dealing with the Commission or even complaints, she should be your go-to person. She's here at this conference. I've worked with her 20 years or more when she was originally working for the county of San Bernardino. And I was a judge and held cases out here and met with her there. On some levels, it's a very small state. I know it's probably a very small EE community. You probably all know each other really well. The same is true in the state government level too. So Sandy's your go-to person. I also brought along Hazelyn Fortune. Would you stand? She is the manager of the energy efficiency program. She's the one who designs the rules, oversees the evaluations, and makes it all work. And she, of course, is the one who gave me a detailed blow-by-blow account of all the things we're doing. So you might catch her at a coffee break.
Great. So I want to add another layer to this. We've talked a lot about the complexity, and very pleased to hear, as I'm sure folks in the room are, about the efforts to reduce some of that complexity. And as we think about even the most sophisticated local governments and how challenging that complexity can be, you can imagine how much more challenging that is for our lower income communities, our smaller communities that don't have that capacity. So I'd love to hear from you guys. Clearly cap and trade, a percent goes to disadvantaged communities and an even higher percent for the affordable housing sustainable communities pot. But as we think about this evolution and move towards a more performance-based system, how do we continue to encourage our innovator communities who are early adopters while we simultaneously lift up those that have been underserved and need special attention? Either you can jump in on that.
This is a good question, and I'm probably just thinking on the fly. It turns out a core part of the California's Public Utilities Commission's job is to provide access to the state's modern infrastructure for low-income communities. We actually give away $1 billion a year in communication subsidies to individuals, and we do another $1 billion of subsidies to the energy rate system, and we do several $100 million a year in housing, targeted funds to basically insulate. It's called energy efficiency, but it's basically insulation, low-income housing. And as I think about that, we have all these different programs sitting together. We've never actually marshaled them into a single coherent program that would assist local communities doing it. Mm-hmm. And as I think about it today, I'm not quite sure how we would do it, but it's clearly something I think we should be looking into.
I think we can do both. So I think through the AHSC program, that is starting to, I think, push the envelope with regard to innovation, new technologies. I think those who are kind of on the cutting edge. I'd like to see in the future, through our guidelines, actually that program focus even more on those who are sort of at the bleeding edge, as it were, highly prepared already, and those who are maybe not as prepared in a current year, but in future years. Transformational climate communities is designed to directly benefit the most disadvantaged communities. I think a few things are needed that are currently not being addressed through cap and trade to really get at those sets of issues. We are pretty strong advocates for deeper and greater levels of assistance in the form of capacity building, working with third-party partners, again, such as LGC and others, to provide that assistance in bolstering and expanding the state's network and degree of partnerships. I think there needs to be, and I'm not speaking for the administration necessarily, but I'll just speak for myself, more funding and more effort behind that. Now there's a challenge with being able to provide that assistance through the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, just because of the nexus with reducing greenhouse gases. But I think there are other sources of funds where we could draw from to ensure that over a multi-year process, the state is working with partners to better assist communities in being able to apply for funds.
For the TCC, the way you've talked about it to date, and clearly the governor's proposal doesn't go into a lot of detail and there's a lot to be worked out, but it's been discussed as a program that would fund 2 to 3 communities, so large grants that would go into these communities.
Yes.
What does success look like at the end of that process? What would be the types of projects you would love to see that would ultimately really transform these communities?
Put me on the spot in a good way. Well, and I'm going to dodge the answer a little bit, but then I'll get to maybe an answer that answers your question. Part of it, I think part of what success looks like will be defined by the local community, and I think that's necessarily so. I think I want to be very mindful of the fact that the program, should it be approved, will be locally driven, and I think there'll be a process where if we're talking about a multi-year set of funds, let's say over 2 to 3 years, maybe even 3 to 5 years, a process through which maybe 6 months to a year, the state is working with the community to define what success looks like and really filling out a community vision, not just with local government partners, but community groups, other finance and other entities on the ground and at the state level to refine what success looks like. So I don't want to sort of jump ahead too much. That being said, I think we have seen a bit through AHSC and other programs what success ought to include. So I think that if we're talking about a holistic approach to sustainable communities, which we are, we would absolutely need to ensure that through the funding of a vision, we are meeting all elements of the governor's climate goals. By that I mean, and this was touched upon earlier, energy, renewable energy, energy efficiency, water, waste, and adaptation, ensuring that the most disadvantaged parts of a given community are actually accruing benefit, addressing issues such as anti-displacement and economic opportunity, expanding economic opportunity, workforce training. We have a set of performance metrics that internally we're, I think, mulling over. We're certainly looking at federal programs and other statewide programs that maybe can serve as models. I'm thinking of U.S. promise zones, promise neighborhoods. The suite of smart cities grants, and I'm sure most of you may be familiar with the US DOT Smart Cities Grant. I think all of those are important to draw lessons from. The dollar amount's also important, and the percentage with regard to disadvantaged communities are important. I'll just talk about two policy issues that are still outstanding right now. So the governor's proposal is for $100 million. The Assembly's proposal, also $100 million. Senate proposal, $400 million. And the legislation by Assembly Member Burke, $250 million. Different numbers and different levels of, I think, need that could be addressed. There's also the policy difference where the governor's proposed a focus on the top 5% disadvantaged communities, which is pretty geographically specific if you were to look at Cal and Bivro screen and where those communities are. And so that right there can probably answer some of the questions with regard to what potentially success might look like. But then in Assemblywoman Burke's proposal, that looks at the top 25%, which is so sort of opens it up a lot further. Whatever the case may be on a policy decision, between the governor and legislative members, I think that we are looking to build a model through the program, whether it's talking about one community that's funded or 3 or 5 communities. I think we would hope to model or use that program as a model for success to mirror across other programs, not just TCC.
Randall, when is that going to be decided? Is that today in the budget or this fall in policy?
Good question. And I've been watching my email, so it could be today. The June 15th is the budget deadline, and a lot is at play. So yes, Tim, it could be as early as today.
This afternoon.
This afternoon, indeed. And let's hope for the best.
Great, and perfect timing. We'll put you right on the spot before you even have a chance to take a seat.
Thanks. Thank you, Kate.
Hi, Patrick. Well, thanks for sticking with your flight delays and everything else to join us. So we've been talking about a number of themes here, all around creating a new vision for California, a more holistic vision. We've talked about changes around metrics for programs that can align better with the governor's goals. We've talked about a need for integration across funding sources to allow for really comprehensive local projects. And I'm curious for you, with a number of important things happening at the Energy Commission around building energy efficiency and benchmarking and the goals around renewable energy and cleaner cars. What are the most promising strategies you're seeing from local governments, and how is the Commission thinking about supporting local governments to play the critical role that they need to play in this space?
Yeah, so I think many folks are probably familiar with the existing Buildings Energy Action Plan that the Commission adopted in September of 2015. And local governments are actually a very key focus there. Goal number 1 is increased government leadership in energy efficiency. So both by doing and leadership by example, things like the Executive Order for State Buildings and Prop 39, but also in establishing long-term, consistent, market-enabling policy supports. Perhaps an example of that would be local benchmark and disclosure programs. And there's a sub-strategy about local government leadership that's really meant to dovetail with the efforts that you're all making under the SB 375 Sustainable Communities and Climate Protection Act. Some of the main focuses, I think, would be really the dual role that local governments play in codes and standards. So there's many jurisdictions that have both proactive and progressive policies just to ensure that the mandatory codes are being met and fulfilling the compliance role. But then there's also many communities that have established REACH codes and actually testing out the next step, being the living laboratory, if you will. So those are significant values as we continue to work together and push towards lower carbon intensities and ZNE. And many of you would be familiar then with some of the challenges with implementing the Building Energy Efficiency Code in particular. So one process that we've just begun with the CALBO, the California building officials, is to establish a very repeatable, continuous meeting that's looking at making the codes themselves more accessible and implementable. So I think this was welcome news to quite a few people. And as we start moving beyond those mandatory roles, really looking at just anything that looks like market enabling and market activation. So I think many of you have probably heard Commissioner McAllister talk about freeing up data as a foundational resource, and that really continues to be the linchpin of most of those strategies. And this would allow innovative third parties and service providers to use analytic tools that help people break down complex energy problems into decisions that are only as complex as they need to be. The more sophisticated analytics and data analysis can happen behind the scene and make those choices more reasonable for people. So we really see local governments as having this unique position as a trusted community resource, particularly for residential and small business, that can leverage that relationship to really expand and scale in this area. In transportation, the Energy Commission has given out numerous grants for EV charging at a regional level. And so very much trying to take a community-based approach with that as well.
Great. You mentioned the roadmap. The local government chapter of that roadmap called for a local government energy challenge, and we've gotten a lot of questions around that energy challenge, and I'm wondering if you could speak to where that stands.
Sure. So that project is still definitely planned. The funding remains unclear. We're looking to reallocate previous resources, and that's going to require some, most likely, legislative approval to do that. So hopefully, as we get through the budget cycle here, next couple of days, we'll have a solid answer for that.
Great, so stay tuned, guys. So the last question, and I'm alerting you it's the last question so you guys can all be ready to jump up with your own questions. I'm curious to hear from you how CEC is working with these agencies and other state agencies, because we hit on that earlier in the panel, talking about the need for integration and the efforts from multiple state agencies to provide more streamlining to make it easier for local governments to apply for grants and to report on grants as well.
Yeah, so I think we are working more tightly with our sister agencies, particularly the Public Utilities Commission, Independent System Operator, and Air Resources Board than ever before. And SB 350 has really forced a lot of those issues home. Some of those things don't filter down first level to local government, so a lot of activity on the demand forecast and planning level activities, but also things like the 50% RPS, the double energy efficiency savings goal that will impact these communities. So we are engaging at a staff level, at a management level, at a commissioner level on all those activities, and then really trying to make similar efforts to reach out to NCPA, NSCAPA, CMUA to make sure municipal utilities and public utilities are equally coordinated. The statewide benchmarking program that we're developing now, that's really meant to mesh with local programs rather than supersede them or sit on top of them. So from day one, it's been conscious effort to make sure those blend together and are complementary. We are really trying to be cognizant both of size of entity when it comes to reporting. And so for the integrated resource plans that are part of SB 350, some of the smaller POUs are actually fall under a cap where that doesn't apply to them. We're trying to create within grant programs a more streamlined or repetitive process to eliminate how much one-offness there is in grant applications. So I think there's similar efforts also in reporting, particularly around RPS, to try and eliminate any kind of duplication and overlap there as well. So I think there's a high level of consciousness about trying to eliminate overhead and paperwork, and it's a little bit of a one step at a time process, unfortunately.
I'd like to make one last introduction. Denise Terrell, would you please stand up? She is the person who has been working to try and come up with these concrete proposals to actually simplify things. I know as I'm listening here, I realize that we're a very different agency than the CEC. One of our jobs is we walk every mile of track in the state as the old Railroad Commission, and we actually crawl under your muni streetcars to see that everything's tied on perfectly. So we're open to hearing exactly what your concrete problems are. You don't have to describe them in program terms. You can just tell what happens when a truck rolls and things like that. And Denise has headed that group within the agency, and so she has both a big perspective and actually a micro what needs to happen on the ground. You should run into her at the breaks and things. I suggest you introduce yourselves.
Great. So questions from the audience. Got one over here. Got a number. Questions.
Joe Lyons, City of Claremont. About there it is. There we go. Okay. Joe Lyons, proud council member, former mayor of the city of Claremont, the coolest city in California this year, having taken second place to Riverside last year. How many electeds, when the mayor asked, how many electeds are in the audience? Oh my God.
You.
All right, I'm it. Okay. And how many members, how many participants in the Georgetown University Prize cities are represented here? Great. I think there's a model for the competition that might be considered as a way of incentivizing communities. And both Randall and Advisor Saxton know of my frustration in trying to get a program advanced that I think in all of its details covers all of the bases that everyone is looking to cover. And it's because it covers all of those bases that precisely makes it difficult to fund. I think that one thing that we've found is that in getting that advanced, there doesn't appear to be a portal of entry for out-of-the-box programs to be assessed and evaluated to provide information to guide the kinds of integrated programs that might be, you might be in search of. I know we were discouraged. We didn't apply because we were told everything was kind of out of the box. So where is the portal of entry for those out-of-the-box programs that communities are developing that in fact would allow you to know what is out there, what is ready, and I will just offer Claremont as a shovel-ready city for any of the kind of comprehensive programs that you might think would be worth funding, because again, we've invested in our sustainability plan. We're well ahead of the curve. Unfortunately, we're not we don't fall under the category of having economically depressed communities. So again, where is the portal of entry and how much outreach are you going to try to get into that process?
So thank you, Joe. I'll say a couple things. Taking a big step back here, and I should have mentioned this earlier. You know, we still need to ensure that we have, at least from the standpoint of cap and trade, a cap and trade system, the source of funds, and I think an extension of our greenhouse gas reduction efforts, i.e. AB 32, beyond 2020. That discussion is happening now, and because it's happening now, there's a good amount that is on kind of on pause, as it were, that could, I think, directly address what it is you're talking about. Of the 100% of cap and trade funds, SGC, we have a portion of the funds that are continuous, and so those were allowed to move forward. But you have 40% of the other funds, which amount to many programs across other agencies, all of which I would say are eager to, I think, offer not just funding, but assistance insofar as working with you all to think through better integration, whether it be from an urban greening standpoint, urban forestry, water, energy efficiency, et cetera. All of that is on hold. Let's hope and knock on wood somewhere that today or in the very near future, we can get those programs approved, the governor and legislature can reach an agreement, and you all can hopefully do your part in speaking to elected officials and others of the need for these funds and ensuring that we reach our greenhouse gas reduction targets. We're eager to provide the assistance and the funds. As soon as we get, and I may be being a little bit presumptuous, but as soon as we get, knock on wood, an agreement, I think we'll be ready to have those discussions and work with you all to think through better integrated programs or investments.
Just to put a fine point on that, if you have time to call your legislator, this is really important. We don't want these cap and trade funds punted again. And we want to assure that the program at large is extended and that AB 32 is extended. So if that is something that, if you found value out of the cap and trade programs and AB 32, and especially if you're in the San Joaquin Valley, the Inland Empire, Southern LA, it's an important time to speak up. Other questions?
Thank you. Rick Brown, Terra Verde Renewable Partners. First of all, I want to commend the CPUC and the CEC for your efforts to do, as Mr. Sullivan said, try to put the gas on getting more renewables into the system. We've had a very successful program in the state, but we also have contradictions. And one of the contradictions is that the customer-based solar that many, I'm sure, of the agencies in this room are involved in, they don't get credit for their greenhouse gas reductions in relation to the RPS model. And that really is a damper on their ability to finance and do additional kinds of projects. So we have on the one hand SB 350, let's move ahead. On the other hand, we have AB 327, which forced the CPUC to do, in the guise of rate reform, things that actually makes it more difficult for customer-based solar to move ahead. But you did a great job of doing as little damage as possible with 2.0. What can we do as a community to get the legislature, to get the governor to understand that every renewable electron is a good electron and that we shouldn't discriminate against customer-based solar that many of the folks in this room are doing and trying to do more of?
That's you guys.
So, Rick, is your concern one or both of these issues? That one, you're just talking behind the meter solar in general, and okay, I didn't know if you were talking about situations where people were feeling like they needed to use a PPA in order to secure the tax credit. Okay, so the first one. I mean, I guess that's kind of an official punt from me, and that's a legislative issue. I know that it was considered during SB 350, and ultimately no changes were made to those rules.
Well, I'm really glad I didn't go first, since obviously the official line is to punt. Having worked for an agency, though, that does a lot of implementation, I think one of the major issues you have is the fact that people don't know what goes on behind the meter, what the greenhouse gas reductions actually are. So that would be, so even if the policy changed, to give you credit for that, speaking, as a commission, we would wonder, well, how do we do that? We do have advances of smart meters. They may provide us solution. We have smart inverters, so there may be some sort of measurement. I think, though, as an industry, you would have to be able to demonstrate that you are indeed reducing the greenhouse gases. For those of you who don't know, we have these fictions in the regulatory world, and the fictions are that the network stops at the meter. What's on one side of the meter is government and the utility's responsibility. What's on the other side is the homeowner's responsibility. And it turns out that that has been enforced for, what, about 70 to 100 years. And so it turns out that we really don't know what goes on behind the meter. Now, smart meters, because they're so smart, they measure everything from minute to minute. You can almost tell what device is on and what power it uses. Well, one of the issues with solar power, rooftop solar, is that it's behind the meter, and people really don't know, except in a statistical way, a general way, what is actually happening.
I think that the limitation of only being able to look at net load or net generation is kind of problematic in that sense. If you were able to have visibility into the entire generation stream, and you'd see the entire load stream, you could figure that out much easier. Yeah,
actually, that's probably what the future is going to hold if you talk about it from a regulatory point of view. Even like Whirlpool and the other device manufacturers are putting smart chips into their appliances, which can then talk to a meter or towards a local area network that can manage and measure the load. To be quite frank, unless electrical vehicles have smart meters that allow them to be charged when there's excess power in the network, electrical vehicles will be very expensive. If we design a system so that whenever you want to have power, you just plug it in, you're likely to blow all the transformers in your block. There has to be some communication that stages their demand and manages that. That is the future where the network, well, the grid will go. The grid will become more of a network of devices that charges. So the solar will probably be part of that issue in terms of charging the cars.
Great, thank you.
Hi, I'm Billy Romaine with the City of Berkeley, and thanks for putting together this great panel. It's always good to have the CEC and the CPUC together in the same panel, and I couldn't let the opportunity go by to not ask about, especially since we've been talking about carbon accounting, to ask you where you see the leverage point from moving from our discussions on energy efficiency to carbon-free fuel, especially since the plan for a building, if we're talking about carbon-free or zero net emissions, looks very different. The road forward might look very different if you're just looking at efficiency measures or looking at carbon-free measures. And eventually, inevitably, in meetings where we're talking about energy efficiency and we start talking about carbon-free, the F word comes up, and we get stuck on fuel switching. And so I'm wondering if you guys can talk about where you see the leverage points for cities being able to engage in that discussion, starting with their energy efficiency forums.
Hi, I just want to welcome. You're a neighbor. I live in Berkeley, and of course, Berkeley is the type of community which has lots of electrical vehicles. I walk my dog, and I see all the Priuses and actually the Teslas are sort of lined up with, very small extension cords, making them work. Where do I think the leverage point will be? I guess speaking as someone who has regulated in a commission for a long time, I always think policy is set, for better or for worse, in the prices. And that is the place where moving towards a carbon-free future will occur. It will probably occur most directly in the pricing of the recharging of electrical vehicles. And to the extent that cities participate in that discussion and how it's done, that will have a big impact on all the permitting you have to do for rebuilding a second grid system or enabling the current grid system to meet the demand through a measured and sustainable growth pattern. So what I would recommend is that you contact Sandy Wynn-Bigler, or not Sandy, actually you can just call our office in San Francisco, and you can contact a local representative, and you can be alerted as to the programs that people think will have a major impact on the cities. And just speaking, as a former judge, I think the electrical vehicle, particularly because it has to do with, permits, electric permits, siting or recharge stations, doing all those things that are very local government intensive, that's where you would have a big impact. If electrical vehicles isn't done properly, trucks would be rolling every day as transformers blow out. So that's my guess.
So obviously there's a lot of questions at a building level, particularly within the building efficiency standards, and the life of a new building looks like it will almost for sure cross a point where electricity is the cleanest fuel. And in some parts of the state that's true already. It's definitely a challenge. Statutorily, those building standards need to be judged cost effective on the avoided cost of the energy. Emissions are explicitly valued in the way that the Energy Commission runs that process. They turn out to be about 10% of the value, and that's both the GHGs with the cap and trade price, and then criteria pollutants as well. So there is some constraints. The place where I think things might start to change is actually in the IRPs and the integrated resource plans, because those point directly at GHG reductions as an organizing principle, and shift that focus a little bit as electricity in particular becomes a less good proxy for GHGs as we move forward.
I'll just say from the standpoint of just incentives, which could be important, can be important, our AHSC program is moving towards awarding more points or higher scoring for zero net energy buildings. We aren't quite there yet. We offer more points now, but I think we'll see an increase in how much we do offer. Our new program, the proposed program, I think you'll see that be a much more substantial component of what is asked for with regard to performance criteria and helping communities define a pathway towards carbon-free. I don't want to say too much more than that, but I think that we have the opportunity through incentives to set the highest level of ambition, and I think what you're describing fits right into that.
Let me add one in the weeds detail real quick for people who are familiar with Title 24 and the challenges of water heating in particular. That is something that's getting better from the perspective of people who want to use heat pump water heaters, and software that basically is a new model for that is available now, effective January 1, 2017, and should make it has to be a good, not best, but very good heat pump water heater, and it should be able to make compliance now. So a little geeky, but I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people who are frustrated by that. It's actually getting fixed.
Great. Judy, I know you had a question right away. Can we get a mic to Judy?
Thank you all for being here this morning. I'm Judy Robinson, Sacramento County Sustainability Manager. My question is cool roofs have had great success certainly in various parts of California and particularly Los Angeles, and they've adopted their own ordinance. How do we get a cool roof mandatory green building code in place for certain climate zones in California? And one of the interesting things that we talked earlier is about interstate collaboration, and like HCD has their piece of the building code, and CEC, and now we have PUC. And so how do you all work together so that we can all get on the same page around this, and for us to know who to go to be able to advocate for this? Thank you.
So the building standards do get a little bit confusing. They have mandatory measures, which there's no way to see your way out of those. And they have a prescriptive level measure, which can be traded off for something that's energy equivalent. And so cool roofs do fall into that latter category, unless someone pursues a local ordinance the way that Los Angeles did. So that's one way. And I could actually match you up with some people with the utility program who could help if that's of interest. The other thing is that within Part 11, within CalGreen, the Air Resources Board has pursued using cool roofs as a heat island mitigation strategy. And that kind of moves you out of the energy code side, but gives another route. Those are the two ways that I would know of most to make it truly mandatory. Basically, it'd have to be adopted at a local level.
I can say definitively, we can't do anything to make it mandatory. That is one of the few things that's beyond our reach. On the other hand, we throw money at energy efficiency buildings, and so perhaps we could target money at that.
Well, maybe one strategy would be as sort of a step towards something like a statewide mandate. You know, the governor signed a green building executive order some years ago. I think it was 2012 for state agencies, had energy efficiency targets, water reduction targets, EV targets, and GHG reduction targets. A lot of those goals have been met. And I know that the governor's office is in discussions with a number of agencies about how to ramp up those goals. And in turn, I think what's set through that order serves as a model for not just other agencies, but the state. And so perhaps if you were to reach out to the governor's office and maybe just share with them the importance, maybe it could be something that at least at the state agency level could be adopted, and then from there mirrored throughout the state. So one recommendation.
Great. We have okay, go ahead.
Hi, my name's Jim Smith. I'm an architect with LA County Parks and Rec, chief of the development division, and we just received a grant, urban greening grant. So there are people in Southern California that are applying and getting them. However, the application's a nightmare according to my staff and grant writers. It takes a team of our small grant writing team plus my project managers as subject matter experts. And the complexity of the application is kind of like the thing's already built, and we're trying to get the funds to build it. So this is just a commentary. It needs to be simplified, and people that put the grant together need to have knowledge of constructability of projects. It becomes the project almost. So if there could be a way of interacting with you folks from our experience, I think it might be helpful. Number two is I would like to see more direction in regards to the nexus of energy and moving water around the state and moving it locally, since about 20% of the energy in the state is used to pump water over the Tehachapi, so we can use it down here. I went to U.S. Green Building a couple of months ago, and instead of buildings, they were concentrating on water. So I think we need to get involved in that, and that was a national conference, so not just local. Everybody's got the same problem with water. It's going to get worse. So if there was some way to kind of weave the two issues together so that more grants were available, more opportunities for planning the relationship of water to sites and the use in buildings, I think it would be an advantage.
Actually, we have a task force on what's called the energy water nexus. We have our energy utilities talking with, well, we regulate water companies that provide about 15% of the distribution services in the state. And what you say is about, is critical. Moving water takes a huge amount of electricity. I've actually visited the California Water Project, where they suck up all the water from the Colorado River, and I was told that 25% of the water, of the electricity generated by the Hoover Dam is used just to get the water over the first hills and to get it to start rolling down towards Los Angeles. It is a major thing. It's a major thing in California. We move more water than any other state, and most states, well, they just wait for it to rain. And we don't quite have that option. Actually, it actually reminds me of a funny political joke that goes to the first Brown. Governor Brown was lobbying for the California aqueduct to bring water down from Northern California, and he lobbied in the cities in Northern California. He said, if you don't give them your water, they give you their people. And with that, he was able to get the water projects passed. That was Pat Brown.
So you touched a couple of chords there. I'm an architect by training myself, so I can appreciate the very particular complexities with regard to buildings and thinking through how we can better integrate both from our application side, making it easier to think through some of the strategies on the ground. And it's difficult. It's very challenging. And I think through our first round of grants through Prop 84, including urban greening, while I think we saw some improvement with regard to making it less onerous to apply. We certainly have a ways to go. There's an opportunity. I think this is what's exciting. Urban greening is part of the governor's cap and trade proposal. It's one of those sort of 40% set of funds that hopefully the legislature and the governor can come to an agreement upon to fund. The Natural Resources Agency will be relaunching that program and actually retooling it, from what I understand, pretty substantially, and looking for public input to not just sort of think through that program redesign or retooling, but also the application process. I think we anticipate from SGC's standpoint an opportunity to, again, if this new program is approved, think through our application and that application and other applications in tandem, again, with an eye towards simplicity. All of our council members, we have 10 of them at SGC. I think more than half of them have sort of stressed the importance of making it easier and simpler to apply. So hear you loud and clear, and would ask you to, please do stay in touch as we think through how to make it easier to apply.
Yeah, I'd recommend you just escalate the complaining. I think
that's true.
Sorry,
that's very, very true.
Because I think there's a natural tendency in bureaucracies to worry about what could go wrong. You worry so much about what could go wrong, and then you put in a little thing in the application to make sure that that doesn't happen. And by the time you're done, let's face it, lots of things can go wrong. By the end of it, you have an application that's almost impossible to fill out. And I think, in my experience, is that bureaucracies are often passive aggressive. And I think the way to deal with that, though, is to up your level of aggressive complaining.
There you go.
I'm happy to take you up on escalating the complaining, if that's. I've got to kind of follow up on I guess this is maybe mostly for Randall. I'm Matthew Marshall with the Redwood Coast Energy Authority, and you brought up that you'd like to see more applications from underserved communities in Southern California, and I guess I would encourage you to kind of challenge the idea of competitive grants always being the best solution, and if we're really looking at trying to have comprehensive and long-term sustainable strategies, having competitive grants, by nature are going to be kind of unsymmetrical and sort of sporadic deployment of resources. And I think there's good examples, and particularly, if you think of energy efficiency funding through the CPUC and the utilities, we don't compete for that. There's performance metrics, and we've got to achieve results. But we're not going up against Sonoma and Mendocino and Lake. We're able to partner with them and also, develop localized solutions to what fits our community best. And then that funding's ongoing, so we're able to actually kind of build on that, build capacity, and have really kind of sustainable, effective approaches on energy efficiency. I would say the CEC has done the same with like Prop 39 funding, or before that EECBG funding, where there's like local government allocations, and you can figure out how to structure that. But it's a way, so instead of us spending our time trying to get a grant and then find another grant to follow on, if we have that just kind of commitment, and not to say there isn't space for competitive grants as well, but I would kind of encourage maybe rethinking the approach of if we're really trying to get this to every corner of the state, let's just fund it that way and and do the best we can with the resources. But I think on the energy efficiency side, how many people here are funded by a PG&E partnership as far as your salary? It's like there's a sustainable model there, I think, that could be replicated with other funding streams.
Very good point. And the conversation around the how best to structure the program, particularly with regard to geographic diversity, allocation, whether it be to local governments and or MPOs or some other entities, that has been I'd just say robust with regard to a conversation. I think we'll see. So in this last year, in the fall of 2015, as we were approving the guidelines for the second round of our AHSC program, staff did propose and take a step towards, after conversations with, again, our local and regional partners, thinking through potentially setting regional targets, potentially even local targets. I know it's not exactly getting at what you're talking about, but working in a step towards that direction. I think what we heard from council, and I think what we're seeing this year, is that the program and the criteria embedded within the program are still evolving. We want to, I think, as a body and as a state, work through what works best in terms of getting the program right. Now, you could say, as a maybe an argument against that, well, local governments, regional governments, maybe are best suited to help figure that out, and so why not hand over the funds? I wouldn't necessarily disagree, but I say all of that to say that it's still very much a conversation, and I think I appreciate your point and hear your point, and would recommend actually that you take it to our council members, the 6 agency secretaries and or the public members. I think you'll see an evolution, not just through AHSC, but the other cap and trade programs, about how we're thinking about distribution, not including the Transformational Climate Communities program. There's still no determination on how those funds are going to be dispersed. Whether it's competitive, maybe it looks like something different when we're talking about the relationship with local government. So, thank you.
We have time for maybe one more question, and then we'll do final closing remarks. A passionate question in the back here.
I'm in the back. I have to be kind of. This question is for Mr. Winston. By the way, my name is Dwayne Baker. I'm with the San Bernardino Associated Governments. And in your comments, you lamented the fact that there is a lack of AHSC applications from Southern California. And I will put to you, and I'm going to ask at the end, that part of that are the guidelines that have been established for the program. A couple of specific examples. For transit-oriented development, the guidelines are looking for 15-minute headways for transit systems. In Southern California, Metrolink is the commuter rail line in Southern California. The most heavily used part of that is the San Bernardino line, which has 30-minute headways. Even though the densities of folks using that in the inbound and the morning commutes is probably higher than what you'd see in a bus line using 15-minute headways. And so the folks along that line cannot apply and be competitive for transit-oriented development unless you consider maybe looking at the guidelines and maybe opening that up. Another example would be in your hometown of Redlands. We're investing $250 million for a 9-mile extension of rail to go to Redlands. But because it is in the planning stages, we cannot be participating. And it seems to make some sense that if you are wanting to examine and study in ways of implementing transit-oriented development, you'd want to do that in conjunction with the development of the rail line that you'd be looking at. And then finally, the last point is, in Southern California, in Riverside and San Bernardino County, we are considered urban. because our MSA is over 4 million people. However, I think most people in this room that are familiar with Southern California and the Inland Empire, if you go through most of Riverside and San Bernardino County, you would define that as suburban by almost any other measure. However, whereas downtown Riverside may indeed be urban in the definition, looking at something other than just the MSA that a particular city or locale resides in, and maybe looking at the actual densities of that particular community, population density in a square mile. Ours happens to be, if you look at our area as a whole, is about half of what you'd see in the Los Angeles area. However, our areas and our applications are held to the urban standard, and our market does not support that. We don't support 30 units per acre. The suburban standard in the guidelines is 20 units per acre, which is probably more achievable for most of our communities. However, we're held to the higher standard. So hopefully, I'm putting it to you, as you look at the guidelines and evaluate how the grants are being distributed across the state, you'll realize that there is this disparity, and maybe we'll open up the guidelines and make some adjustments.
Very serendipitous timing, and thank you for the set of comments. Paige, Monica, Allison, if you guys are in the room, could you all raise your hands there? In about 2 hours, maybe 3 hours or so, we're meeting with Dr. Ray Wolf and a collection of colleagues, both with Sandbag, City of San Bernardino, Ontario. We were in Riverside yesterday. This is you're touching upon a key suite of issues that we all need to just sit down and talk through, looking at the year ahead. I won't go into too much more detail than just to say that it is top of mind, and we anticipate having a robust discussion around the issue of headways, the economic related issues, density issues. There are, and I think we recognize that there are sets of challenges here throughout the Inland Empire that are unique, and that we need to address uniquely. Not saying what that's going to look like, because it's obviously too early to say, but I can assure you that we are taking it seriously, and look forward to working with you all and your colleagues hand in hand and figuring out how we can better address the set of challenges. I'll say as well, not just in the context of AHSC, but through transformational climate communities and that top 5% focus. I didn't quite say where the geographies are, but you could look at a map and see where they are. Parts of the valley, parts of South LA, and a pretty substantial concentration here in the Inland Empire. So I think that's another opportunity directly to get at some of the challenges. But thank you again.
Great. So with that, I want to give you all a chance to provide some closing comments, and we'll start with you, Patrick. Okay.
Well, I guess wanted to reemphasize that within the built environment and existing buildings, the Energy Commission just looks at local governments as the front of the line engagement to scale some success in this really important sector. And so to that end, we are super conscious of funding issues and doing what's within our control to see this local government challenge program come to fruition. We're aware of trying to balance complexity with depth and reach, and really just want to thank you for all the efforts you've made thus far, and continue building on those relationships as we start pursuing some even broader goals with SB 350.
Likewise, I just would thank you all, of course, for your ongoing partnerships. We're here to continue to, I think, listen and evolve our programs. I don't want to say that we've gotten it right, certainly within the context of AHSC, but we want to continue working with you to do that. I mentioned my colleagues earlier on. They are here throughout the day, Allison, Monica, and Paige, so please do find them and speak with them further. I think we have a really exciting opportunity here with extending cap and trade and what's coming forth, hopefully with this new program. I think it's a direct opportunity through funding to get at thinking through integration on the state side and within our local communities. And we aren't going to get there without all of you. So excited about that, and look forward to working with you all moving ahead.
My comments are largely the same. I wanted to thank Kate Meis for organizing this conference, and I want to thank you very much for attending. It's always good for us to meet other people dedicated to public service who are trying to get things done. I guess if there's any word I have is sort of don't lose heart. It is a system of checks and balances. It seems to operate about much more slowly than we'd ever like, but we do get things done. And I think if we recognize the goodwill that we each have, it'll make it easier to get things done.
Great. Please join me in thanking our fabulous state presenters.